Okay, in this video we're going to look at the factored form of a quadratic function. In the past you've looked at standard form and you've looked at vertex form. This is just an additional form, and part of Algebra 2 is seeing various representations of the same concept. So and hopefully it helps you get a better well-rounded idea of how all these things fit together. So we're going to look at factors and zeros of functions. So this graph over here to the right represents the function f of x equals x squared minus x minus 6. How do the zeros of the function relate to the factors of that expression? So let's start with this expression. If we were going to factor this expression, it is a trinomial, so I will use backwards distributive or backwards FOIL depending on how you learned it. But I look at the very first term, which is x squared, and I say to myself, well, what would multiply to be x squared? Well, I'd have to have x and x. So if I multiply those two together, I would get that x squared term. The next thing I actually look at is the very last term. I don't worry about that middle one, but I have to think of some things that multiply to be 6. And I have some options because I got 1 times 6 and I got 2 times 3. Now the one I want to pick is the one that would help me get -1x in the middle when I combine my like terms. So 1 and 6, those numbers are too far apart to make 1. But 2 and 3, if I did +2 and -3, those could add up to be -1. So I'm going to go +2 minus 3. If I continue to check my distributive, this would be -3x, this would be 2x, and this on the end would make -6. So I could see if I combine those like terms, my factors are correct and I get what I started with. So that is a little quick review of how to factor. Now how does that relate to those zeros? Well, we can see the zeros are the x-intercepts. So I have 2 of them. So the x-intercept is at -2, 0, but the 0 is x equals -2. Same thing over here, the x-intercept is at 3, 0, but the 0 is when x equals 3. Notice the factor here of x plus 2, its x-intercept and 0 are -2. This one, x minus 3, notice the 0 and the intercept are at +3. So it seems like the signs are switching on you, which is what's happening. Now, to kind of further these relationships, if I take my factored form, and I use one of those zeros that are on the graph, let's say I pick -2, oops, and I simplify that, you can see you would get 0 times -5, which is 0. So kind of another relationship of why they're calling them zeros, because when you substitute them into your expression, you're going to get 0 for an answer. If I try this second one, the 3, notice I get 5 times 0, which is still 0. So those factors and those solutions and the zeros, they're all related. If you use the factored form with the zeros, they make 0, but if you're comparing them, they are opposite signs. One last thing, factored form looks like this. Your A value, remember, is your stretch and compression, and it also tells you if your parabola is going up or down. The P and the Q, those are just your factors. Like in our problem, it was the 2 and the -3. So they could be positive or negative depending on your situation. Okay, so I want you to get your notebook out and I want you to try this one, and there's a little typo there that's supposed to be a -8. Let's see if I can maybe wipe some of that out. So x squared minus 2x minus 8 is what we're doing on this one. So can you tell me the relationship between the zeros and the factors of that expression? So hit pause and give it a try. Okay, so if you're looking at the graph, we know there's a 0 here, an x-intercept at -2, 0, and the 0 is -2, an x-intercept over here at 4, 0 with the 0 of 4. If I take this expression and I look at my factors, I'm going to do x and x, and then remember we look at the 8. So I could do 1 times 8 or I could do 2 times 4, but in the end I gotta get -2 when I combine those outsides and insides when I'm distributing. So I think I'm going to go +2 and -4 in this case to make that -2 in the middle. And let's check our zeros there. So if I use the 0 of -2, I'm going to get 0 times -6, which is 0. So hey, that's a good one. And if I try the 0 of 4, Notice I get now 6 times 0, which is 0. So there's that relationship that when you substitute your zeros into your factored form, they actually make 0. Again, keep in mind that was a little typo. There should have been -8s.